therefore 9:30 sharp. I just mentioned at the beginning that the Mayor, who has injured her foot or has a sore foot or something like that, will be joining us by Zoom, all right? I will now read the council blessing. Ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana I ngā tākeke mua I a mātou araro. I pono ana mātou ke kaha tonu ki te whakapau maharahua pai mo nā hapore e mahi ne mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa ki a whaiahua ki totika ta mātou mahi. Ma te maia, te tero whakamaia, me te hiri kai te arahi I roto te kahitanga me te roha. Okay.
Well done.
Thank you. I might learn that by heart, my task for the next meeting, right, instead of stumbling through a reading of it. Anyway, thank you, Jocelyn. Item number 3, apologies. Richard Mansell, Waikanai Community Board Chair. Cam Butler, Otaki Community Board Chair. He may run late due to council business. Councillor Coe is overseas but may join us online if possible. And Sam Nicol, our external auditor, also sends an apology. All right? And those are noted.
Can we move and second?
Somebody move, they've been noted, accepted. Thank you, Jocelyn, seconded by Lawrence. All those in favour say aye, contrary no, carried. Declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda, are there any? Noted that there are none. All right. Item 5, do we have any public speakers, any members of the public who have indicated or wish to speak? No, noted there are none. Now we move to members' business, all right? And I'm going to give an update on an item which was referred to on our agenda at the last meeting, and a paper has been circulated, which I hope everybody has. I'm going to speak to it, and then we can discuss it, all right? I think I indicated at a couple of meetings last year that after 1 year of activity of this new Risk and Assurance Committee, it would be appropriate to review how we're doing and in particular look at our terms of reference. I have expressed previously a view that we could be a little bit more forward-looking rather than backward-looking. Of course, it's very important to be backward-looking. We do have a key accountability role, and particularly looking, for example, at the annual report, including financial statements, which we go through in great detail for the benefit of giving council assurance that it's been done properly. And that, of course, is a legal obligation of council. But I've talked, I think, generally about can we be a bit more forward-looking in our agenda, and also whether we might have a bit more of a focus on asset resilient issues, given that there are asset management plans in place for the council, and also a relationship that this has to emergency management issues as well, taking the definition of assets in a much broader sense than simply council assets. So just as to note that, we're pleased to have the members from the emergency management group here, and they're going to make a presentation on their work after this this comment by me, so that gels them quite well. So, look, in my view, I'll just speak very briefly to the paper that's been circulated. I think I'd like to think the committee is functioning well. I think it is proving educative for most committee members. It's certainly educative to me in terms of learning a lot about refreshing my memory of local government and also getting to know more about Kapiti Coast and Kapiti Coast Council. So much of this is, much of the work we do is very important, of course. Some of it is very standard, like the monthly review, the review each meeting of health and safety is a standard item. The review of adherence to Treasury management policy is a standard item. That's not to say that because they're standard that they're not important, but really I'm just raising the question as to whether we might seek to make ourselves look a little bit broader and further ahead. So let me just talk to the proposals which are on this paper here for your consideration. One of the things I note is that the committee has no formal role in the long-term plan and the annual plan. Not all risk and assurance, or audit and risk as they call them in most cases, committees do have this role, but some do, a number do. In fact, I participate in regular forums with the Office of the Auditor General where they raise topical issues for discussion, and the one last week was the audit of the long-term plan and the annual plan and the consultation document. These the audit of the consultation document, I think, is legally optional, but nevertheless, these do occupy the time of councils, and in many cases, as shown by the forums that the forum that the Auditor General ran the other day, which I attended, councils have a role in looking at the audit, in selecting the auditor, and also in determining the audit fee. So that's not to suggest that the audit of the long-term plan will necessarily cover a lot of issues in depth, but it does. It has, to my mind, as I say here, an analogy with the work we do on the annual report, which is we look at the audit, we look at the document, and we provide some assurance to council that it is meeting its legal obligations and that the information that's there is reliable and useful. So that's the first point I'm raising as to whether or not we might expand our terms of reference to have a role in reviewing that work that is audited in the long-term plan and the annual plan and the consultation document, and that would lead us not to going into a great deal of detail, but it could be it would lead, I think, to David and I attending meetings of the ANDRIFIA, attending meetings of the full council when it discusses the long-term plan, and making comments as appropriate. And some of the issues which might crop up could include what do the forecast 10-year financial statements show about the financial position of the council going forward, the debt levels, the risk to credit rating, and all these sorts of things which may be there. And there are other issues that we could refer to as well, which include the ensuring that whatever's in the asset management plans is properly linked with the long-term plan. That was the first issue, that we would have something of a formal role, a more formal role in the council review of the long-term plan and the annual plan and the consultation document, and that the three of us would attend and make comments as appropriate. All right. If we need to do that, if that is agreed, we would need to make some change to our formal terms of reference. The second point that I raise in this paper, but bearing in mind, just on the long-term plan and the annual plan, I just mentioned in this note are referred to in our key organisational risks. They're part of Organisational Risk 8, financial stability, and also legislative compliance, Org 5. On asset resilience, the council has asset management plans. I have to say I'm not sure where they all come together in terms of consideration as a whole by council. They should, of course, feed into the long-term plan, as I've just mentioned. Asset management plans are mentioned as a risk treatment under Org 5, and there is reference there, I think, to critical infrastructure. So the reason I'm raising this is that it seems to me that the committee might like to expand its role in terms of asset resilience by having an occasional dive, is the way I would describe it, into asset management, but this could be broadened to include emergency management work, which means we're talking about assets in a broader sense than council assets, because they're all interrelated. If we look at Hawke's Bay, we know that electricity supply, communication supply, service stations, in our case, others like the airport, the rail system, not to mention Transmission Gully, the banking system, all of these sorts of things are of fundamental importance in terms of asset resilience and response and recovery, is what I'm saying. So it's for your consideration as to whether you feel that that would be, it's your consideration as to whether you think that's a worthwhile thing. And I think the presentation we're going to have from our asset management, our emergency management team will be of some value in that as well. So I simply mention this, that it could well be that I'm not sure where the home for emergency management is in the councillor's structure, all right? But it could be here. We would have an occasional deep dive, an occasional report, an occasional update from our emergency management people, and that would enable us to raise issues relating to asset resilience defined in a broad sense. There's my proposal. It's been a long while coming out, and I'm sorry it's at short notice, but for your consideration and comment. I've discussed it with Mark, of course, and with David, before we discussed it, before I discussed it with the Mayor and Darren, and I think there is general support there for it. But of course, it's up to you as to whether, as committee members, you feel what I proposed is relevant and appropriate. The floor is open. Bernard, you're the first. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I support it 100% completely, particularly having a role in the annual plan and the long-term plan. Now, the current long-term plan, we have set aside $24.9 million for an east-west roadway. That's a huge sum of money. Now, my understanding, I can be corrected on this, is that work hasn't started yet, right? So 24.9 million. Does council then have the right to distribute that money for other purposes? I know they have done it in one particular case, but and that's why I think the role of the audit is in where a large sum of money is invested in a project and for some reason it's not carried out. I think it's an area that, yes, the audit and risk should get involved in.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, Bernard. I just comment, of course, that it's not up to this committee to make decisions about council, how council decides to allocate or reallocate its expenditure. But thanks for that comment anyway. Now, I think, Liz, you're online somewhere, are you? Hello? Where is she? And apparently you've got your hand up.
Yes, I have. Can you hear me?
Away you go, please.
Hi.
Welcome. Nice to see you.
Now, I think what you're proposing, David, is really, really good. Just with reference to sitting in on the LTP, you might want to just narrow that down, I think, because, you know, we've been having extensive LTP meetings, and I think your interest is really more around the financial projections.
Yes.
So I think rather than having like a blanket, being required to attend all meetings, you might want to just say where you would wish to attend the meetings where there is discussion of the financial aspects of the LTP.
Okay.
But you may disagree with that. I don't know, but that would be my recommendation.
I think I'll save my comments till the end, right? After we've done the round of the table, all right? Thank you, Liz.
Okay.
Lawrence, you're next, I think. Anybody else?
The Mayor's also.
Oh, the Mayor. Sorry, the Mayor's online. Janet, where are you? There you are. Good morning.
Ata Maria. Thank you for the suggestions, David. We had a good conversation about these the other day. So I think it's really positive, the suggestion around formalising the participation in the long-term plan and annual plan. This has, of course, happened in a more informal way in the past. We have had independent members of this committee sitting in and making comment and feeding into that process. So I think formalising that is a really positive step. I think Liz is right that we really need that, primarily that oversight over financial projections and financial matters, but also around potentially that ties into what you're talking about with asset resilience. So, and how we deliver our infrastructure as well. So, yeah, very positive. And the home for emergency management, I think that's really positive. Of course, we have our regional discussions around emergency management amongst all the mayors in the Wellington region. So this would also be a good forum to bring back some of those discussions. So really positive steps. Thank you for what you've done.
Thank you, Janet. Next was, Lawrence, of course. Please proceed, Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support this completely in terms of the intent behind it, and my only question is related to the independent members' remuneration, because this is putting extra work on you outside of attending committee meetings, and I know remuneration is directly related to committee meetings. And so my question would be around the fact if we're putting this into terms of reference and there is an expectation that independent members will attend some of those other meetings to be briefed and to be able to have input into those, whether that affects remuneration. So that's probably a question for staff, but something that I think needs to be raised because, yeah, I think that's fair.
Well, thank you, Lawrence. Thank you very much. I'll respond to that particular point immediately and say this, is, of course, is not the reason for raising it, and it's not up to us. We do this work willingly and out of interest and perhaps and to some extent, of course, service as well. It's not the right time to talk about increasing fees. Is the only problem I see. Even though I could argue that, in fact, my hourly rate is actually probably well below the minimum wage when I take into account all of the work, all the time that we spend. But so be it. But thanks for that comment. But I think we'll take that offline separately. It's a separate issue. All right. But thank you for raising it. Jocelyn, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I certainly agree that it would be really useful for the three independent members to have some oversight for both the long-term plan and the LTP. And I suppose all the decisions that we make as councils is part of a framework, and so it actually just potentially connects some of the dots, or actually make sure that the dots are connected. But I suppose in relation to the current long-term plan we're going through, we're almost at the end of that before it goes out to consultation. So I'm not sure how that would work in this current process. Some of the comments have been made by the Mayor and Lawrence. I was also going to raise. So in terms of how would this potentially change the contracts of the three independent members, which does relate to remuneration. The other thing is too, would you be, I suppose one would have to ask the question about whether you'd had voting rights or whether it was just there to actually ask questions. And I suppose there's also briefings that we have as well. And I think the delegation potentially would have to be changed as well if we did go down this path. So yeah, so some of it is admin stuff, but I think I agree that there'd be some benefit. Interested to hear what other people say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. Look, I in no way envisaged that we would have voting rights at all. That's not on the table, and I don't think it would be appropriate. So let me make it clear that that's the way we perceive it, and certainly the way it's been discussed with the Mayor and the Chief Executive. Just one other quick comment, Jocelyn. I like your comment very much about connecting the dots, and an illustration of that would be when we have a long-term plan, to what extent does it reflect the asset management strategies which have been developed, for example, all right? And what is to be spent on asset renewal and replacement and upgrading? Is that the plans consistently reflected in the long-term plan? For example, just as a point on connecting the dots, maybe I could just respond to the point raised by Liz, Councillor Coe. How wide should this be? I think we should probably do this on a sort of a suck it and see basis. Really, it is true that that, as Jocelyn says, my particular interest is in the financial issues. That's really only the only area I really know anything about, to be honest. But I mean, it could go broader than that. If you agree that there's a role for participation, let's start the participation and see what it leads to and where it may be particularly valuable. That would be my response to that. Yes. David, your turn.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just following on from what you said, I've often thought it'd be nice to be able to pigeonhole the accountants, but I've never managed to do it. And while I'm trying to do that, they're trying to pigeonhole the lawyers. Yeah, everything's all linked up, as you said. There's dots everywhere. And I think the Chair's right. We just suck it and see. I'm not running around looking for work. Won't be doing things where I don't think I'm going to add any value. I just won't. I'll just turn the page. But I think there will be some things where we can contribute. And one that I have experienced in the past coming into things is you've looked at umpteen drafts of the plan. You know what that phrase means. You know what the implications of that 3.5 lines are, but us almost like a bridge between the public and you go, what does that mean? And you look at each other and go, well, it's obvious. Of course it's obvious to you because you've had explanations about it. But the public are going to not have a clue. So there might be odd things like that where you want to say, well, we'll add another sentence and explain what that project is about. With something when we struck the other day where it was called a rising something or other, no idea what it was. But everyone else never knew what it was. Yeah. Thank you.
Mark, you indicated you wanted to make a comment in respect of...
Could I just make another comment?
Oh, sorry, Jocelyn.
Yeah,
Yes.
too. So correct me if I'm wrong, Mark. So with the likes of the long-term plan, you know, obviously we've had a lot of briefings, we've had workshops, et cetera, and so we had discussed a lot of topics and a lot of financial implications. But in behind that, there's also a lot of stuff that we don't discuss, which is, you know, when you go through the actual document line by hundreds and hundreds of lines, and that isn't necessarily put out to public consultation as well. So I can see the benefit of which makes your job even better if you really wanted to look into it. But there is a whole lot of stuff that we don't necessarily as councillors have oversight for. I just leave it with that, and Mark can make some comments on that.
Well,
maybe
I'll
too.
just add to that. I mean, I did attend a meeting you had a little while ago on the long-term plan. I found it interesting, but to be honest, I found it, from my point of view, way up there in terms of level of generality and principles and matrices and so on, with due respect, all right? It was well above my head in a sense. And I think that perhaps having the three independents at the table might mean we're talking about some more specific issues, and you referred to linking dots and that sort of stuff. You know, well, what about this? How does this relate to that? It may assist your consideration if we provide that sort of input to the discussion. That's what I have in mind. Right. Mark, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Morena, everybody. I'll try and pick up everyone's comments. So, look, one of the important points to note is, look, I absolutely support the proposal. Long-term plans are subject to audit, annual plans aren't. So even where we have an annual plan that goes out to consultation because it's triggered the significance of engagement policy, auditors don't audit an annual plan. However, with a long-term plan, we go through exactly the same process as we do with our annual report. So we have to agree a fee, an audit fee, we have a letter of engagement, we have an audit plan which reflects the Office of the Auditor General's focus areas. We have our auditors with us right now. They've been with us in January, and they audit everything. They audit our policies. They do. They audit by selection. They audit our asset management plans. They audit all the supporting information that supports the consultation document. They audit the prospective financial statements. So, and then they issue an opinion on the consultation document, and they issue an audit opinion on the long-term plan itself. So, picking up the point raised by Councillor Coe, is how I see this working is exactly the same as the annual report. So, audit will present a letter of engagement, a fee, and an audit plan to this committee. Audit will then present the closeout report, which is closing out their audit of the long-term plan. And in that report, if there's any disagreements, if there's any findings, unadjusted differences, that gets presented to the committee. And they also table their control findings, so the weaknesses. If they detect any weaknesses and they rank them, if it's high, low, moderate, if it's high risk, that would come to the committee. And this committee's role would be to oversee and monitor that we are closing out those audit findings, just like you do with the annual report. The Mayor mentioned that in the past we've had our independent members attending our LTP workshops, and that's worked very, very well in the past. In the past, when our independents have attended those workshops, they're entitled to a meeting fee. So there's a standard meeting fee, so they are paid. And from my experience, what we've seen is when the independents are in those workshops, the councillors, the community board chairs, community board members, and indeed the public actually look to the independents for advice during those workshops. How do they feel? So there's huge value in having that. So, in terms of suck it up and see, logistically, what I propose is that we would work with the committee, with the LTP, in exactly the same way as we do with the annual report. You will see if there's any issues that are raised by audit that they're concerned about that need attention, it'll come to this committee. And the involvement in the workshops. Yes, we've had a lot of public workshops and we've got a couple to go. And there's still a lot of work to be done before Council actually adopts the long-term plan. But I have spoken with Sam yesterday, the audit partner of Ernst & Young, and very shortly we will be receiving our letter of engagement for the long-term plan. Unfortunately, we've had to start with audit without that, or else we'll never finish. But we will also see the LTP audit plan, and it would be, with everyone's agreement, it is our intention to bring that back to the committee. The committee will only still need to meet 5 times a year. We have quarterly meetings plus an extra 5th meeting for the annual report. It is my proposal that we would work the LTP within those 5 meetings. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very much, Mark, and just make it clear that I did not envisage that the committee would meet separately on this, that this would be done through our involvement. Well, it could be anything to do with the actual appointment of auditors and so on could be done through this committee, as is done for the annual report. Yeah. So there would not be separate meetings held on the LTP by this committee, but the 3 of us would be there, depending on whether we're availability and all those sorts of things. But we would have speaking rights, but absolutely not voting rights. And our objective would be to make ourselves useful to councillors and to assist in their consideration of the whole issue. That wouldn't necessarily tie it totally to the audit plan. We could make comments, presumably, on any particular issues that arose that we thought might be relevant in terms of an overall risk perspective. Right. All right. All right. Any other comments before we... Well, look, I'll take it that there's general agreement to the paper. So if somebody will move, I think, how should we do this? Somebody should move that this be accepted. It's got to go to council. It has to go to council. The question is what goes to council, or what do we need to do to forward something to council, right?
So thank you, Mr. Chair. The council are meeting on the 29th of February, and there's a report, proposed changes to the governance and delegation structure. So what our proposal is to reflect these changes in that report. So we would be extending the delegations from the council to the Risk and Assurance Committee. It's 2 lines. One is to have an involvement and oversight in long-term plans and annual plans, and the second one is to have we've drafted some wording, but oversight over emergency management readiness, response, and recovery. So we would be that report would effectively, if approved by council, would increase the delegations of this committee for the items noted by the chair.
The committee is not... Oh, sorry, Lawrence, did you want to...
Will that involve a change to the terms of reference as well?
I think we're saying it does, yes. But we would leave that to be handled, of course, by our excellent democracy services people. But you're advising me that there's no need for any specific decision here, just simply perhaps noting general agreement, or is that going too far, or what? And that the issue be forwarded to council for its consideration, or what?
That's at your discretion. It's not needed, but you can.
Well, I think since we've had a paper and had a discussion, it's worthwhile just saying something. And this would be to the effect that it has been discussed and there is broad agreement with the proposals, and it will be referred to council for development and consideration, whatever the terms are. Is that okay? Who would like to move that? Moved by Jocelyn and seconded by Lawrence. Okay. Thank you. I will put the motion. All those in favour will say aye. To the contrary, no. It is... Oh, sorry. No?
No, we just need to double check the wording because you did that too quickly for us to note that in the minutes. Thank you.
Oh, God, you want me to remember what I said 10 seconds ago? All right.
So that the Risk and Assurance Committee notes the updates
Notes
of the chair?
and agrees in principle to the proposal and agrees that it be forwarded to council for full development and consideration. All right? Is that right?
Perfect.
Perfect. We got
Okay.
it. Thank you very much.
Shall I put it again in favour?
No.
Say aye. Right. Okay. All right. We're done.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Now it's our pleasure to talk to our colleagues from emergency management. Who's coming up to the table? James, you're coming up. Roderick, you both coming up, or others, whatever.
I'm just going to swap out with James.
Of
and then
course.
come back.
Who's your third member? James or Roderick? Who's your other person?
Roddy Heckling
Yes.
and Mark Duncan.
Mark. Right. Well, welcome very much to James, Mark and Rod from the Emergency Management Group, Section, Division, what are you, Department? Whatever, Group? Group. Anyway, look, we have met before. David and I have had briefings from you before, or at least one briefing with you before, which we found considerably interesting, and we know generally the context, which is that greater emphasis is being placed on council roles in this whole issue, and that it does go much beyond council assets. It involves all sorts of other players as well in the whole management and response issue, and I think we'd like to know more about that. There are developments in legislation. I'm not sure whether further developments in legislation are forthcoming. You might like to flag that. But also, from my point of view, feel free to make comments as to how you think this committee might add value to your work, right? Which is really the whole purpose of my suggesting that it come onto the terms of reference in some more formal way. So over to you then, James. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tēnā tātou katoa. Ngā mihi o te ata. Ko James Jefferson tōku inga, for those that don't know me. James Jefferson, and welcome to your worship online, all the elected members and the independent members as well. So look, thanks for the opportunity. I did promise you last year we would come back and do a shallow dive into some of this stuff, and I just want to introduce to my left is Roddy Heckling. Roddy is staff and our senior advisor emergency management. And then immediately to my left is Mark Duncan, who I'm going to introduce as the group controller because I can never remember his current title. He's seconded into a project that might be of real interest to you, an assurance piece across the region. And we're going to tag team on a short presentation. I'd ask you to hold your questions. Note the slide number. We put numbers on the slide, and we'll take questions at the end of the presentation. I will try to speak as little as possible.
When you say Mark as a group controller, that implies that he's outside council.
Yes,
he's
sorry.
Much bigger than council. So we look forward to hearing more about that.
Thank you. So look, I'm going to leave that first slide up. There's a couple of things I want to draw your attention to. There's three key takeaways I'd like you to have after this presentation. If they're not clear, please challenge me or us on them. And I want to give you assurance that currently I rate us as a C+, in terms of our fit for purposeness, if you like. The team tell me that's pretty hard. I also want to reassure you that we're on a significant pathway to improving and professionalising the work that we do locally and regionally. And lastly, I want to give you some key messages to take away to community around individuals and families and communities being prepared and having planned well. And the reason I say that is you look back at the last year, there's certainly the last few years, I think as the Chair rightly points out, there is an increasing expectation that Council will come in on the white charger and save everyone on day one. That is just not the case. We message now to community, look after yourself for 7 days, because in the big events that will come, it'll be pretty chaotic. So there's three key messages, and I'll try and round back on those. But look, this first slide is really to demonstrate that in Wellington we take a regional response. The CDAM Act requires to have groups, so we group together around the constituent councils and are ably supported and prompted at times and pushed at times by Remo, who are kind of the framework around everything we do, particularly in the capability building space and sharing of best practice and relationships that are built there. So
REMO being the Regional Emergency Management Office.
Wellington Regional Emergency. Yes, please correct me because there's acronyms up the wazoo. So really that's the point there. But see if we can get this. Suggest that this will be a very light once over 101 for emergency management. I'll give you a second to read that. And then I'll plain English that. And I did like David's comments before about rising mains and actually making that in plain English, because that's what we're trying to do in the space too. At my age, I need mnemonics, and I would use the mnemonic CPC. So this framework is around coordinating our partners, controlling chaos, and the protection, for the purpose of the protection of the community. When you boil that down, that's really what emergency management is. And the emphasis for me is on controlling or coordinating our partner agencies, and we'll talk a little bit more shortly about who they are. And again, it goes back to that point, the council aren't the one-stop shop for this. We might be the shop front, but roles and responsibilities of those agencies are critically important. The slide does mention the framework, which is really, really helpful. You have to be careful how quickly you say this, but this is the 4 R's framework. And again, I'll give you a second just to read through those. So reduction really is that proactive ahead of time stuff. Readiness and response is the stuff that we're doing and doing pretty well at the moment, notwithstanding some challenges. And recovery is a piece of work that Chris Pivan is wrapping her arms around, putting a whole framework of work around that in her role as a recovery manager. If I can, and thank you, Mr. Chair, you said how can we help, and I'm going to lay a winner or a challenge down to the elected members. I think the gold is in the reduction space. I think that's where we can get maximum traction. So the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the US says that there's a 6-to-1 return on investment that we make in this space. For every dollar that's invested ahead of time and upfront around infrastructure, all of the stuff that we need to do, there's a $6 return. I believe in New Zealand, and I'm happy for anyone to challenge me, given the cost of construction and infrastructure, it's a 10-to-1 investment. And I think this is really the space that obviously we're exploring through CAP and all of that, but it's a place that we need to pull the layers back. I think it's where we get that real return on investment. And I'm reminded by His Worship the Mayor in Auckland on day 2 of those tragic floods up there. He did quote what Dick had allowed buildings to be built in flood zones. And unfortunately, that is the legacy of policy decisions that were made. I accept that our understanding of risk and the risks of climate change and natural hazards is much improved over the last decades, but actually this is about having the right policy settings in place that we're building in places and developing in places that are appropriate. So that's my challenge to you, and I'm happy to take any questions on that. So look, that's the 4 R's framework, and then there's who's who in the zoo. These are the constituent councils of the Wellington Regional Management Group. Then we have the first responders. Then we have our Lifelines group. Fran Wild, I think, is still the chair for the Wellington Lifelines group. And then we've got those other partner agencies that I talked about. These are in the welfare space and obviously the public health space. I was going to try and smash that into one slide with all of those groups sitting over the top, just to show how chaotic it looks and how chaotic it can be on day 1 of an event. and I come back to that point, that acronym or the mnemonic that I had, it's coordinating our partners. That's one of the key functions of emergency management. It's not for council to do everything, but to leverage and maximise that partnership approach. So dear to your heart, and we might have to amend this slide a little bit, given the Cordero just beforehand in terms of the governance structure. I'm fully supportive of us coming as an activity area to this committee on a regular basis. So we have the joint committee. I think Mayor Tori Whanau chairs this group, and that is all the mayors, and their role is essentially setting strategic direction and governance, obviously, for the group, that regional response. Sitting below them is the CAG, and that is all of the CEs and a couple of representatives from partner agencies, and their responsibility is implementing and oversight of the implementation of whatever strategic direction the joint committee sets. And then what used to be called sub-CAG is people like myself in this EM collective, senior managers, senior advisors, tasked with operationalising and implementing whatever comes out of the group plans. Key there is the relationship building and the partner agencies, the relationship building and trust and confidence in peacetime, so that when we come to the big event, we're not starting from scratch. We probably below sub-CAG would be this risk and assurance committee then, given the conversation we just had earlier. But look, that's probably it from me, and I'm going to hand over to Roddy. Mark.
Morning, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, James. Just to reiterate, my name's Mark Duncan. So my substantive role is Group Controller for the Wellington CDM Group, so looking across the region. But I'm currently on secondment working on a project which is really relevant to the first item you discussed today, and it's setting up a regional assurance function for the region. But before I get into the detail of that, I thought we'd just take a quick second just to acknowledge our counterparts down in Christchurch City Council and the Canterbury CDM Group. There's a number of staff there that have worked long hours over the past 48 hours looking after their communities at Port Hills, so I just wanted to recognise that before we kicked off. So I've just got a few short slides just to update you on this project, which will dovetail really nicely into the initiative you were talking about this morning of getting more visibility in a committee like this. Part of our role at the regional office is working cross-boundary with our counterparts in other CDM groups. And earlier in 2019, the Auditor General actually did a report at Auckland Council, and there's a key finding on the slide there that you might want to take a minute to look at, which we took note of, and really was one of the genesis of why I've decided to initiate this project. And it is all about giving just a clearer picture to committees like this about where those strengths and weaknesses sit across our emergency management system, so that we can harness those strengths, share them across council, and obviously focus on those weaker areas we want to lift performance. And that's an area we do in a few different ways now, but we think we can improve. So as James mentioned earlier, we have pretty clear legislation that gives us some direction and guidance on what's expected. Sitting below that at the national level, there's a really good document called the National Disaster Resilience Strategy that sets kind of 10 strategic goals over a 10-year period. And that's where our group plan was informed, and those set some really good, clear regional goals over that 5-year cycle. Below that, a series of annual plans across all of those different partner agencies and councils that James outlined that are a member of the group. So those all provide a degree of direction and a set of goals, but one of the gap areas is probably how we've progressed against those goals. Have we made progress? Is the investment that we're making delivering a return? There used to be a system run by the Ministry of Civil Defence and Emergency Management, now called NEMA, another acronym, National Emergency Management Agency, where they'd come into the group and they'd do capability assessments, a couple of examples up there. But the last time our group was assessed was actually in 2015. So there's been a significant gap between those capability assessments as McDem, the ministry, was changed to NEMA. They had to go through a restructure rebuild process, and that's been put on hold. And their assurance functions currently in the process of standing up, but not clearly funded for the next financial year. So that's where we've decided again, on top of the Auckland findings, that we wanted to get something going regionally so that we could give a clearer picture of where those strengths and weaknesses sit. So that's kind of the genesis as to why we wanted to get this project going. In saying that, there is quite a few different metrics and measures we use to look at performance, so it does happen. It's just not necessarily done in a really structured and coherent way, and it probably doesn't get the visibility at committees like this that it deserves. So again, it's fantastic to hear this morning that that's the intent here in Kapiti, and a number of other councils are looking at setting up a similar model, which is good. That way we can take any regional products we develop and hopefully make it easier for councils and partner agencies to get the visibility I think you're looking for. So it's early days. I've been doing this for about 3 weeks, so this is very indicative and conceptual, and we're really open to feedback and particularly keen on input on what you'd like to see. But conceptually, we've come up with these sort of tiles or focus areas that we think are going to build the picture you're looking for. And some of these are underway, which is good. We can draw on them, and some of these will take a little bit of design and development. So that top tile there, after action reviews, that does already occur across the region, and actually Alistair, who works for you here in Kapiti as part of the REMO team, has led that process, and we do have quite a good sort of evidence base across a number of after action reviews of what's worked well and what could be improved in responses. So that's an item that potentially could be considered to bring up to a committee like this if there was a response in Kapiti, for example. The second tile, moving around, I think it'll be to your left, is that community preparedness survey. So we do a regional survey every year, and I note later on you'll see some results from your local survey, and that's where we go out to the community and look at those areas of preparedness like water storage, which is quite pertinent at the moment in some of those other council areas, emergency toilet arrangements and emergency shelter provisions and things like that. And obviously that informs a lot of the work the community resilience team do when they go out in the community and try and support the community to develop plans and preparedness in that space. So that's a pretty good survey. We've got good data going back a number of years, but again, we probably don't pull that together and do enough analysis and develop those trends to bring again to a committee like this. So there's opportunities with that. We're quite lucky. One of the other findings in the Auckland report was that they didn't do enough training and exercising, but we're actually really lucky in Wellington. There's good commitment from councils and partner agencies, and we deliver a lot of training. You'll see some more updates on that shortly. And at least 2 exercises occur in Wellington every year. So we evaluate those exercises, and that's a really good insight, creating that stimulated stress as to how a system will perform. So that will give us, again, some insights that we can feed into an assurance framework. That bottom tile is probably the biggest gap for us at the moment, which is a focus report against our own group plan. So we set those goals in 2019. We haven't really taken stock of how well we've done over the past 2 or 3 years. So that's an area that will need to be designed and developed, but that's something we want to create in the coming months. And then those 2 tiles on the right, those capability assessments are what I mentioned earlier. That's where there's been that sort of 8-year gap now, given the changes going on at the ministry. And that's where we're going to work with local councils and partner agencies to develop a nationally aligned and regionally consistent tool that we're looking to roll out for the next 12 to 24 months, while the national level stand up their own assurance function. And the goal being was all those assurance activities will feed into a more coherent strategic risk register at the regional level. So the Mayor mentioned earlier that the mayors get together as well as the chairs of Ngāti Toa and Te Atiawa. And that will give the Joint Committee some good visibility of what the regional risks are, and hopefully they'll be supported and supplemented by the work going on here at the local level with a risk register. So some existing work we want to build on and some new initiatives we're intending to stand up over the next few months, which we're hoping will just create a much clearer picture of those strengths and weaknesses across the system. And then just to provide some early conceptual thinking, these are the sort of dashboards that are getting talked about that might provide a clearer way to present that information. Easy to produce the dashboard, but the metrics and measures and tool that sit behind this are not developed. So there's a lot of work to be done before we'll actually be able to produce some credible dashboards. But conceptually, this is the sort of elements that are being talked about. I mentioned the 4 Rs earlier, how we sit there, the National Disaster Resilience Strategy, how we're tracking against those priorities, and then the capability components, which Roddy will talk more about shortly. So that's a very quick overview of that regional project, those tiles we're looking to work on in the coming months, and we can come back in a future date and update where we get to with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. So we'll now ask
Kia ora, Chair. Ko Roddy Hickling, toko ingoa. I'm the Emergency Management Advisor here at Kapiti Coast District Council, and I'm just going to take us through the operationalised journey that we're on in terms of the EM space, where we've been and where we're going. So obviously the first slide is about the hazards that exist within the Wellington region. No great surprises up there. But in terms of the planning aspect for EM, we generally plan for, concentrate on the top 5 risks within the region, and the top 5 being pandemic, earthquakes, flooding, tsunami and storms. Now a lot of that planning we do transfers across to other scenarios, so it pretty much covers all the bases. I just want to just touch on a couple of those hazards, and I like to frame them up as our most likely event and our most dangerous event. Just before I start talk about this, yesterday was the first year anniversary of Cyclone Gabrielle. So, you know, they're still impacted, especially in Tairāwhiti, Hawke's Bay, Auckland and Northland around those events. And I just want to acknowledge those people that are still affected, and obviously those families and communities that are still dealing with some of the outcomes from that. But in terms of severe weather events, they are the new normal. We're going to expect a lot more of these type of events, and we're going to expect a greater frequency of these types of events. And this slide here just reflects, we're seeing that here in the Wellington region, with some of those statistics. So impacted by a severe weather event, I call that our most likely outcome. So we do a lot of planning, a lot of training around that type of scenario. Our most dangerous is a earthquake, and we're talking about a major earthquake. And you may have heard about the two scenarios being Alpine fault magnitude 8, and also the Hikarangi subduction zone earthquake. So they're both major risks to the Wellington region. Interestingly, the AFA, a lot of studies being done about the impact around it would have on the South Island, but GNS has just commissioned a project to actually start looking at some of the effects it may have in the Wellington region. And this is off the back of the Kaikoura earthquake in 2016, where it was centred in the South Island, but the effect on Wellington region was quite significant and continues to be affected these days. So, and at the end of the day, if you're looking at the slide, the likelihood of one of these scenarios occurring within our lifetime, within our children's lifetime, is very high. So that is a scenario or a situation that we are very conscious of and do a lot of planning and readiness around. And a lot of the preparedness messaging we're pushing into the communities is around that earthquake scenario and the resulting scenario. Talking about preparedness, I just want to step through a couple of risks or challenges we have in the response space. One of them is Mark's touched on is community preparedness. There's been a lot of data collected over the last few years, but in the last 3 years, I hesitate to say post-COVID, we've seen a drop in community preparedness or household preparedness. Now that is something that's not just unique to Kapiti, but it's something that seems to be a trend that's occurring nationwide. So you can see a lot of our work program, which I'll share with you later, is driven towards community preparedness and raising the awareness of household preparedness. I think the messaging is one of the most effective ways someone can contribute to a civil defence response is being prepared themselves, because that takes the burden off the emergency services and the official response to look after them. So that's the biggest thing that people can contribute to in this response. The other challenge we have is in terms of the emergency management workforce. So I'm talking about the staff that staff the Emergency Operations Centre and the Emergency Assistance Centres. Emergency Assistance Centres, you may hear them being called civil defence centres or welfare centres, but here in the Wellington region we call them Emergency Assistance Centres. If you're not aware, those staff are all staff from council staff, so it's over and above their own primary responsibility. We're quite fortunate here in Kapiti that our emergency management workforce has remained pretty consistent over the last 12 months, sitting at around 70 people, noting that this is over and above their normal BAU business. If you look at that diagram up there, to staff 2 shifts is what we require if we were to activate the EOC. We require 78 trained people. We're almost there with 70 people. But that's 2 shifts. So that's fine for an event of a minor event of a short duration. An EOC can successfully and effectively carry out its responsibility with 2 shifts. We start looking at an extended duration or a major event, then we're going to really struggle to effectively conduct our responsibilities as EOC because we'll be burning out our trained staff. I think the other thing we need to remember as part of our EOC staff is and just like our emergency services, our EOC staff are part of the community. So they will be effective from the event that's occurred. So the priority is always to their own household and to their own families before they can respond. So our numbers may look reasonably comfortable to staff 2 shifts, but in reality, that may be a challenge. So a lot of our work streams are focused towards those 2 areas of raising community preparedness and around readying our EOC and our EOC staff to respond. So what have we been doing? So that's a very short snapshot of what we've been doing over the last 12 months. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to just have a squiz through that. There's one thing I haven't put on there is that we also, as a council, we deployed staff in support of the Auckland anniversary floods, Cyclone Hale and Cyclone Gabrielle to Auckland, Northland, Tairāwhiti and Hawke's Bay. Now that has a two-way benefit. Not only does it support the areas they're going into, but it supports our staff and their confidence in dealing with that situation. But the information and the experience they learn in that environment, bring it back to what we hear in Kapiti, is invaluable. We can never get that sort of experience through training. But also, our staff also get the opportunity to look at different systems and bring the good back to Kapiti. I know I went to Tairāwhiti and I brought back a lot of their welfare processes they had up there because obviously their welfare process has been battle tested over a number of months. So it was a matter of bringing that process back, adapting it, and we're implementing it here at the local level. So there's a lot of benefit in those deployments. But once again, it's a balancing act between deploying staff and the BAU business which occurs back here in council. In terms of what we've also been doing, as I said, a large focus of our work program is around community engagement, and this is a very short snapshot of what community engagement looks like over the last 12 months. Now, I haven't put who's leading these particular activities because we have an integrated approach here at Kapiti, where KCDC may lead an event with Remo and support, or we may be the lead with Kapiti Coast District Council support. So to me, it's an integrated approach, so we're both actually working together to provide what needs to be delivered or the outcome, the effect we want the engagement to be. So. A lot of effort's going into community engagement. What are we doing now? James touched on the professionalisation of the EM workforce, so this is something that's quite dear to my heart. And that's about trying to build up the 4 Cs, the capability. So that's we're doing that through rolling out civil defence emergency training across council. So all council employees will be required to undergo a degree of civil defence training, which then starts inculcating that culture where civil defence is not an add-on to someone's job description, it's part of someone's job description. It also gives us access to surge staff. As I spoke about, we've got enough EOC trained staff to actually manage 2 shifts. Our vision is that the surge staff will be able to come in to extend those shifts out for longer periods. So that's the capacity bit. The capability, we're looking at a remuneration program to recognise those that are part of the emergency management workforce, and the remuneration package will be targeted to incentivise higher learning. So therefore, we're trying to raise the trained state of the EOC to a higher level. So therefore, to employ that surge staff. The competence bit, we're using regular training and opportunities, and just trying to take advantage of any deployments that may be available to send our staff, some of our key staff to actually get that exposure and experience to a live event. And the last bit is the confidence, and that's we've got developed a 3-year training cycle in terms of our emergency management staff. Last year was year 1, which is we termed the crawl stage. This year we're in the walk stage, and next year we're going to look at being in the run stage. So developing a training cycle that builds up to a large activity. So that's about the professionalisation of the workforce. Everything else is pretty self-explanatory. We are fully involved in the Wellington acute water shortage. Now, the water shortage isn't something that directly impacts Kapiti, but we are part of the solution. So a lot of the planning that's going into the Wellington shortage has benefits across a various number of scenarios. So we've very engaged in that process because we're taking a lot of information and a lot of tools and processes that have been developed as part of that planning and bringing it back to our local plan. So which is good. What we're going to do as part of preparing for the future, our in-house emergency management is going to grow, which is fantastic. Obviously, we're going to roll out professionalisation of the EM workforce. Will be rolled out across the organisation, and that's growing that capacity in those 4 Cs. We have an exercise. Our next exercise at the local level is in May 24, and obviously we're still driving that community engagement. And I suppose the last point, it was quite important to me, is that we continue to build readiness and responding to events that will be occurring as this happens, as this occurs. Kia. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Did you want to make
We're
some
nearly, I
Okay,
did if I
James,
can.
okay,
Just
sure.
the 3 key takeaways that I referred to at the beginning of the top of this was, I get, and again, 3 or 4 Ps there to help me remember, but I give us a pass mark. I think we're as good as we can be at the moment, but actually, as Roddy talked about, that professionalisation pathway, and all of the staff being, because when the big event happens, there'll be no such thing as BAU. This will be our BAU for the foreseeable future. So getting staff ready, as Roddy said, to surge in. Those 2 shifts will last us a week, and then people will be burnt out. So that's part of it. And my plea to you is take back to your communities and your families, plan and prepare, and be ready to look after. Community to look after itself for 7 days would be the biggest learning, I think. But look, thank you for your patience. That was a bit longer than I thought. 19 slides looked okay, but really happy and would welcome any feedback and happy to take any questions.
Well, look, thank you, James, Rod and Mark. I must say I found that absolutely absorbing, and particularly when we've been watching on television the last couple of nights, the revisiting of Hawke's Bay and Taraifiti. I'm very pleased to know that some of you were up there on the ground, which is very important. The other thing I'm struck with is just how broad the scope of this work is and the extent to which it delves into all parts of our community, particularly beginning with the look after yourself start, but also, involving even the local radio society. It just spreads everywhere. And just how much activity there is in the community apart from council structures, which is there to be used properly. So look, I found that great. So I will leave it to people to ask questions or make comments. Jocelyn, you're first. Oh, sorry. Oh, Glenn, sorry.
Yeah, hi, thanks, James, Roddy and team. Just a question. So that readiness and response phase is fantastic, and I think that what you're doing is outstanding. It's probably a question for James in respect to your first introduction around reduction is where we can get the best gains. Where are we in the reduction space? And I guess I'm thinking it's infrastructure, it's resilience in our waterways and our infrastructure stuff, and maybe just comment around the effects of the LTP in terms of where we sort of loaded up with cost and looking at making reductions where we can and cutting our cloth accordingly. So just a comment around that reduction.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Through the chair, Look, I think we do a lot of work, and I probably didn't do it justice. We do a lot of work in that space already in terms of the resource consent building team, the asset managers, when developments are coming into us, and try to hold the line against some bare minimum standards. So like the Code for Development, for example, is based on a very, very old NZ, New Zealand Standard 4404, I think, and we've taken that and localised that, but it's always to the lowest bare minimum. And that stems out of the, I think a view around get out of the developer's way, trust the developer. And there was a wonderful piece of work working alongside the Three Waters, which was called the NEDS, NEDS, National Infrastructure Design or standards, and that was going to be lifting this. So my hope is that hasn't disappeared. We're going to reach out to DIA and see what's there. So there's some work happening in that space, but it's on an ad hoc basis, application driven, trying to raise the standards. I think where the value is, and I'm not sure what it looks like, to be honest, Councillor, is, and I'd welcome Mark's insights, but I think it is in the policy settings in the district plan and our requirements, no building in a flood zone, or no more building in a flood zone. We've got one currently at the moment, which will be the first place for a retreat in the district, managed retreat. We actually can't decline the consent. All we can do, the best we can do, is put a notice on the property for future developers, or for future owners, should I say. So I think it's in those policy settings around the district plan and the raising of standards through our engineering design. And I don't know, Mark, if there's any other magic bullets in that space.
Yeah. Just a follow-up question. So the Minister of something was talking about a national directive around giving councils the power to bring in pushback for natural hazards. Has there been anything come down the pipeline? No.
I'm just checking with Mark because he's probably closer to the beehive than I am. But I've heard the same kōrero.
Yeah.
And I guess our experience here in Kapiti is what science is used to base those decisions on, and the challengeability of those science. So if the minister was in the room, I promise I would be saying to the minister one source of truth for all of the science that we need.
Yep.
I know, Darren, if you've heard any more, I didn't know whether you were reaching for the mic there, but
thank you.
Aaron, did you want?
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, James. I know there's some freshwater repeal in the 100-day plan, and I know that they are talking about hazards, but I haven't seen that in the 100-day plan. So I dare say, and can be a bit closer to this, MFE are probably working like mad ducks at the minute as they try to understand what it is that the minister's wanting.
Thank you, Darren. Well, look, we've got a lot of questions here, as I thought would happen. We've got Jocelyn, David, Liz, Arifia and Bernie is the order I've got now, all right? So the floor is yours, Jocelyn.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you very much for this very interesting presentation. And funnily enough, I've sort of zeroed in on exactly the same area that Councillor Cooper has just done. And I suppose I've got two questions, and this is the first line. I suppose based on slide 3, it talks about identifying and analysing our risks. So my question is, what has that been done for Kapiti? For example, are there risks with, for example, is our stormwater system being well managed, or are there risks in that area? Our water pressure, for example, if there are fire as the result of an earthquake, is that high enough to allow the sprinklers to go off? So a risk register, to me, I'm interested to know if we do have one or whether that's in development, and I think that's something that probably should be coming to this committee.
Again, through the chair, thanks, Councillor. Look, there is a high-level risk register that'll be coming to you from Ninka shortly, but picking up on the chair's comments earlier, we do need to do some more work around the maturity of our asset management plans and whether they actually have a an emergency management lens over them. So I would say from that perspective, and when we get into that piece of work, it may be that they're already looking at that, but it's certainly something I flagged with the guys this morning, just as the chair was talking. So there's a high-level risk register, but in terms of localised understanding of our risks in different places, I don't think there's anything formal. I'm looking at Roddy to see, and I think it's based on that local knowledge and particularly the institutional knowledge of our infrastructure guys.
So thank you for that. And I suppose too within KCDC there are obviously lots of different areas and people might know that, but it's about collating it all together. So that's my first question. My second question is how, so the Wellington Regional Civil Defence is probably been the main focus here today, but how does that relate to, I suppose, Kapiti's particular potential risk areas and slightly different things that could happen here? How can we ensure that what happens here as a disaster can actually be dealt with rather than through a regional organisation?
Again, through the chair, look, good question in terms of how we activate, whether it's a local declaration, as you'll have seen in Christchurch this morning, and the role of the ECC or REMO, the group, and oversight and support. And so we will always be activating the EOC when it reaches the trigger, and we will be reaching up to the ECC for support. And it's a two-way street, if I'm being honest, but actually, and the relationship is really strong that we can have the challenging conversations. That's not a fit for purpose response in Kapiti, or we need A, B, and C because we're not in a position to be able to respond to whatever the event is. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but we do have that local autonomy, but the relationship with the ECC is one of primarily support and guidance, and then reaching further up when that help is needed from a national perspective.
Thank you.
I've noticed your request, Cam, you're further down the list though, right? So next, David, right?
Oh, thank you very much. And really good presentation, guys. It was really, really informative. We talk a lot about Remo and the Wellington region. And the problem with regions is they're just lines on maps. We're closer to Levin than we are to Seatoun or Martinborough. And the kind of things, if weather's the biggest issue, then the weather up here is, as we all lovely know and enjoy, better than anywhere else. But sometimes wilder. Do we look north at all? Is there any, if a disaster, something happens that affects us and Levin, do we go, oh my God, I wonder who their guys are, what are they doing? Because I suspect we've got more in common with them than we do with the Wairarapa.
Yeah, again, through the chair, great question. Yes, we do, and Roddy might be able to fill in more detail. We had a desktop exercise yesterday and Alistair, my sincere apologies, I meant to introduce Alistair Batch, who is our Operational Readiness and Response Remo advisor, who did get the memo about the blue shirts today. And then next to him is Renee, who is our Community Resilience, both a wonderful resource that we use. But we had a desktop exercise yesterday on a tsunami scenario, had all our partner agencies there, as well as our colleagues from Horowhenua. And they attend most of our meetings. Roddy, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, just through the chair. Yeah, so we have quite a close relationship with Horowhenua Council, our counterparts within the council. So they attend a lot of our training and meetings, and we do the same. Also talking about doing a cross-border exercise where it affects both regions, so we're working together. Also, when Levin suffered tornadoes a couple of years ago, Kapiti kind of contacted us and if they required any help. So they're still working on relationships through there.
Okay, thanks. And just one for you, James. I guess it's a question I sometimes ask Darren or Mark. What do you hope doesn't happen today? I don't mean what, when you get up in the morning, what do you think? Oh God, I hope that. I don't mean what disaster. But basically, I suppose in a nutshell, what's your weakest link? What's the thing that would really throw your system? Not the weather, not the event, but what's the weakest part of the system? What's the bit that you think? I hope that doesn't happen.
And look, a really insightful question, and I'm happy if my colleagues have a different view, but I believe the recruitment and retention of our people in the ELC and the EACs, that is our biggest challenge, our biggest risk, but also a best pull because our people are passionate about Kapiti and very, very well connected. But I do think that's the thing that would keep me awake, apart from the dog. That's the thing that keeps me awake at night.
Fair enough. Thanks very much.
Liz, online, you're with us, Liz? It's your turn.
Right. Can you hear me? Look, my question is about doing things at a very much a community level. I think this is obviously a huge issue which needs to be tackled in terms of regional initiatives, local initiatives, and at the community level. But I see from where I sit, there is a bit of a gap at that community level, or even at a level within communities, and in terms of how we handle that first 7 days or so, or even the first couple of weeks, and just how well resourced we are within our communities. So, I mean, for example, where I live, my civil defence centre is the Tohoro Hall, which is an earthquake risk, and between my house and that facility, there are 2 bridges. So I'm just wondering, what effort are we putting in really at a micro level to look at how we resource people and the facilities that are available to people at that very local level, and how we can build resistance amongst our very small community groups, whether community boards have a role to play in this or what. But one of the things we're thinking about for Tohoro, for example, is doing a survey of people to find out what resources are available amongst our local residents there, and even just to build connections to know who is living in each house, how many people are there, do people have specific medical needs or other sort of needs that means they might need some kind of extra or some sort of specialist help. So how do we resource things at that very, very almost like micro level to make sure people are prepared?
Thanks, Councillor, and again through the chair, I'm going to ask Renee to respond to that in some detail about the awesome work that she's doing. But I do want to reassure the committee we're blessed to have Renee. She is passionate in the work she does, and she can quote some numbers. It's a work in progress. But Renee, you might want to talk to a little bit of the detail of the work you're doing.
Sure, thank you. Through the chair. Hi, Liz. You'll know from some of the work that we've been doing in Tohoro and with the Tohoro Beach community that I did some sessions up there that really broke it down into a street level, down to a household level. So part of the initiative I'm running at the moment is talking about distinct and isolated communities. So these are communities that might need a little bit of extra help after a disaster, and that help might not be coming for a wee while. So working with those communities to draw on the assets and the skills of the people around them, looking at really good community response plans, and looking at how they can work together to solve some of those problems. Now, the trick is always going to be that there's one of me and there's 53,000 people in Kapiti, but that's why I really have to get down to that community level to empower the people who are living in those areas, who know those areas the best, to take responsibility and ownership over their own preparedness. And I think Tohoro is a really good example of that. There you'll know that they're looking at solutions for the beach at the moment, whether that's could be a community case situation where they put in a shipping container, or they might even look at other options, how they can utilise the bus stop cafe in terms of a mini hub. So we've been looking at the satellite hubs for those isolated areas, so smaller community emergency hubs that tie back to the main hub. We've also got another example of that is up in the gorge, where they can be easily isolated. We've got a radio up there, and they've been having regular practices with their larger community hub. But definitely for those distinct and isolated communities, they do face greater challenges, but they're also a lot more I'm allowed to say that? They're a lot more resilient than some other communities as well, so they've got great skills too.
Yeah, and I just want to acknowledge the work you have been doing, Renee, at Te Horo. It's been absolutely fantastic, and it's really got people engaged and motivated, so thank you for that.
Kia ora.
Next is Olivia, and then Bernard, and then Cam.
Tēnā tātou, tēnā koutou, ngā tangata e hāpai tēnei take nui mā tātou katoa. My name is Audiwea, and I'm the representative on this committee for Ngāti Toa, Ngāti Raukawa and Te Ātiawa. I just wanted to open by saying it was really timely with what you've proposed, David, for us to have this presentation. I think it clearly demonstrates the value of bringing this kind of kaupapa to the Risk and Assurance Committee. I do think we need to make sure that when it does come onto our agenda, we will have enough time in our meetings to give it the attention, because I'm mindful of the time we've spent, and I think it's been really valuable. I want to also lead by saying, as an ex-service personnel, as an ex-operation officer of Civil Defence, regional officers in the Manawatu, I have a particular interest in this. I want to commend you. I think the presentation was perfectly pitched for this group, so not too much detail, so I was really pleased with that. I'd like to note to the council members here and to the staff of the council that one of the things, and I'm really keen to hear, pleased to hear, James, you say that you're trying to lean in on those consents processes that allowed subdivisions and so on building to happen in flood zones. I won't repeat the sentence you said, but I think actually it's very relevant for Kapiti Coast, being coastal and also so close to those mountains with many riverways. So I have got a few comments to make. I think you've done so much work, and I think your presentation deserves it. I will say that you've got a joint committee of governance with the chair of Te Runanga o Tuarangatira and Te Ātiawa, but it doesn't appear to have any Raukawa representation. So you might just want to note that. I love the 4 Rs, and personally, and my opinion may matter to nobody, but I think your focus on reduction is absolutely spot on. I think your regional capability initiative has been is really, really important. I think you've nailed that. We can't wait for a national 2019 or something you said, since something's been done on assessing our capability. So I want to commend you on that initiative. I think that's really, really important if we're going to survive such a significant issue. I also wanted to note that I was concerned about the training. Really pleased to hear, Rod, the effort that's going into it. I do note that these are people who didn't take these jobs on necessarily to be facing significant crises, and having been in those crisis situations, I know the toll that it takes. So I wanted to commend the collaboration idea as well, and activity. And even if it's not us suffering, there is reciprocity in the end, and hopefully they come. I think it's really important because you noted that there's no business as usual in emergency. That's true. Your people can do 2 weeks and they'll be affected. So in the event they're affected and they can't get here, their primary focus is on their families and their homes. The collaboration is the only way we're going to get through this with suitably skilled people. So I wanted to not comment on that as well. I love the reporting matrix. I think that's really, I know we're not there, but I think that's it's ambitious to do quickly, but I think it's essential, and I like the key foci for those. My final thing that I wanted to say is that I want to note the engagements and the struggle it must be in the community to try and get people actually to come out and participate. I know you had trouble in Otaki, although we thought it was quite a good turnout. But I think that 7-day resilience message has just got to get through. If people know that they've got to do it on their own, you're going to do it hard for 7 days, get ready, because we're not there. I think that message is really important, so that then it sorts their expectations that we're going to come in and solve everything. It's just not going to happen. So I think that message is really important. I really, really enjoyed the presentation. I'm really pleased to hear that we're doing all this work, and I thank you all.
Kia ora and thank you. That's humbling feedback, but it's the team. They take, I'll think out loud and say something, and both staff and our REMO partners, this is their mahi. We're lucky to have such great people. So thank you. That's really humbling feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Bernard seems to have vanished, so I'll call you, Cam, all right?
Oh, he's back again.
Oh, Bernard, you're on.
I took my name off, Mr. Chair.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Okay. The only comment I have to make was, instead of being a C+, I like to see by the end of the year we get up to a B.
Or better. Thank you, Bernard.
Okay.
Good comment. Thank you. Cam, it's yours now.
Tēnā koutou. Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things the Otaki Community Board is looking at working on this year is food resilience in the case of emergency, and a few other, making sure all of our people within our area are getting the right food. Is that something that the emergency management people would get down to in terms of what we do? So we're looking at, can Otaki survive for those 7 days? Do our people got the food there, etc., particularly if they're growing their own kai?
Kia ora, through the chair. So the answer to that is yes, absolutely. So I see my job as somebody that weaves different connections together. Food resilience is something that's popping up all across the coast, and there's many different options to collaborate. I also see it as an opportunity to go where people are passionate and where the energy is, and I'm pretty sure I can tie anything into emergency management. So absolutely, I think that's really important, and there's a few connections I can share with you from other areas that are working in that food resilience emergency management space too. Kia ora.
Okay, so we'll pull you into that when we put that hui together. Ka pai.
Thank you. Well, look, I think we'll draw this to a close now. I think this has been a great discussion. Most councillors have participated. Most people present have participated. Look, I think. Thank you very much, James, and you and your team. It's been a fantastic presentation. We look forward to seeing you again. We'll work out when that might be. You don't want to be trotting along here every meeting, but I think the suggestion was you might come every 6 months or so. But it really is good to have this on our agenda, I think, and an absolutely absorbing presentation. It is really, I think, shows how important this is to a risk and assurance committee to actually be involved in this, in some sort of overview in relationship with you. So many thanks to you and your people for coming. They're really good. I think, yes, look, I propose we take a 6.5 minute break, which will be rigorously timed. All right. James, you people are welcome to stay for a cup of tea if you want to, but I'll adjourn the meeting for, 7 minutes. 7 minutes, okay? Thank you.